Welcome to this episode of Executive Tech Talks, the show where we talk to financial services executives about their technology tribulations and triumphs. Many thanks to ServiceNow, who is our exclusive sponsor for Series 2. That Venn diagram overlap that we've talked about between automation, risk mitigation, and digital customer experience. It's almost, when you think about these three things, automation has its core focus, risk mitigation has its core focus, and then there's digital customer experience. How do these three things overlap, and where are they different?
Every time I go back to these examples about deciding with your cyber and your product partners what on a page or a screen or a user interface is a really important part of your experience and what is sort of second tier. And so again, if you have a number of components that are really important, it might be worthwhile, and in my experience, it is an investment that often pays off, especially during sort of critical high pressure situations, to invest in some automation to decide if something really unexpected happens. We have some automation in place where we can quickly decide and decision, and when we decide, the execution of a risk mitigation control is fully automated. And that could mean, for example, if you have a screen again with a number of components you care about deeply and others you care a little less deeply, maybe temporarily disabling the components that you don't care about as much, or changing, you get into all sorts of engineering discussions, maybe changing the caching strategies that you have in place, changing how much traffic you send where. There's lots of engineering discussions, but during sort of critical situations, you don't want to have this engineering discussions. You want to know what the plan is and execute it immediately, and that's where the risk mitigation comes into. It's like, okay, operational team, if something goes wrong, here's your playbook, here's your run book. Push this button. It happens to execute these steps, but that automation there becomes really important. And so that is again a little bit of engineering time that you invest up front, that will pay off mostly during high critical situations where something unexpected happened, and you want to be able to execute quickly. So there's, to me, a part of your resilience organization, and a percentage of it should focus on what do we do if that happens, or rather when something happens, and they spend time on automating actions that provide some relief or impact mitigation.
What about the downside, the dangers of automation in that scenario? And I'm reminded of the Facebook incident a few months back, where they had actually done exactly as you recommend and built in automation to kick in. And in their case, the automation failed, but there's also the case that the automation, you get what's called the sorcerer's apprentice, where the automation fails in a different way, which is it won't stop and it takes over the universe. How do you mitigate against the risk of either uncontrolled or inadequate automation?
So I don't want to speak to those specific situations at Facebook, but what I can say is that the automation should be part of a software development lifecycle, just as any change that you do that you make in production. In other words, you design for the feature, you get the requirements, you do design, you build it, you test it in lower environments, you test it, you deploy to production, and then perhaps you test it, on purpose in your production environment. Software can fail, right? People, process, systems can fail, but I think that we have, as an industry, we know how to make things better, and so an SDLC can help you tremendously with that aspect.
That's an excellent response, which is basically treat all of your automation as you would any other software. It's software. It's in fact enormously powerful software, and the way you mitigate the risk of releasing software with fatal flaws in it is the same way you mitigate the risk of releasing automation with fatal flaws in it, which is exactly what you said. Controlled DevOps approach to testing and multiple layers of testing, both as the code is released and upgraded, and every so often as part of an overall system test.
That's exactly right.
What would you recommend from the standpoint of overall system tests? I mean, I'm speaking from, in my experience, resilience testing is something that you need to do multiple times a year and constantly raise the bar. So if you can perform flawlessly in a particular scenario, throw a wild card into the scenario. We're having a war over there, an earthquake just struck over here. So, there's a pandemic and nobody can come into the office, and just keep throwing those wild cards at it until you get better and better. It sounds like from what you've said, you believe in the value of proactive system-wide testing. Is that accurate?
No, that's absolutely accurate. And I'll go back to what we discussed the other day about there being two prongs. You'll have your standard make things more resilient, and then what do we do when things go wrong? But building things that are resilient, absolutely. So capacity management, performance management, and performance testing, chaos testing on individual components and larger systems, and those are processes you can run much more frequently than a few times a year. And so, so there's the ongoing sort of things you do there, and then they say the project based. We're making it. There's a project where there's a change that's going in, and then you focus even more on those. So the whole goal of your resiliency organization is to make that something that your business and your executive organization can understand. Saying, we have this much headroom, and that should be a large number, right? So we're ready for so many times more volume than we see on peak days, and then that is a number that consists of many data points, but you distill it down to like 10%, 100%, 300%, 3,000%, a number that says what is sufficient, and then that becomes then a business discussion, right? So what number do you aim for as far as extra capacity in your systems? And that becomes, you project out what your growth, what to your point about external events, what does the world look like, and how much resiliency we build in, because of course adding capacity costs money, time, and engineering. So that then that becomes a discussion you can have on a pretty high level. Say, we're currently here, is that enough, or do we need to go here? And that helps the decision making process. And so that I think is part of how you get ready for the unexpected by having those practices on the left, and then of course when something goes wrong, what do you do then?
Thanks for listening to this episode of Executive Tech Talks, and a special thanks to ServiceNow, who is our exclusive sponsor for Series 2.